Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, the place to come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker and welcome to episode 306, Facing the Mirror, What We Don't Want to Admit. Well, welcome back as we finish out this month, which has been all about relationships, healthy ones, unhealthy ones, and the huge impacts they have on our lives. We've looked at communication, behaviors, and looking at changes you might want to make in your life. We even talked about the common struggles that clients typically have, and last week I actually nudged you with some gentle questions to help you in your work. Well, what better way to finish out the month than to talk about the things we don't want to talk about, the things we don't want to admit or face. And as we all well know, they can often be the very things that stand between us and the life we say we want. And that's because they're often the hardest truths we have to face. Ones about ourselves, about our relationships, and about life. And these are truths that feel heavy and uncomfortable. The ones that bring up shame, fear, and grief, sometimes trauma we haven't looked at. But they're also the truths that set us free once we stop running from them. Over my 20 plus years working with clients and in my own personal growth, I've seen just how much energy gets wasted in avoiding reality. But when we face it, even if it hurts, we get back clarity, peace, and some self-respect. So let's break down some of the hardest truths in each area with examples that you might recognize in your own life. The first area of truths are the ones about ourselves. One of the biggest ones is that sometimes we're the ones in our own way. You know, we often blame circumstances, not having enough time, too many obligations, lack of energy, lack of money, for why we don't follow through on changes we say we want. But the hardest truth is that many times it isn't the external factors, it's us. So for example, let's say you tell yourself every Sunday night, this week I'm going to start walking in the mornings, or I'm going to finally sit down and write that proposal, but somehow every day brings a new reason why you can't. The alarm feels too early, the weather isn't perfect, or you suddenly, quote unquote, need to clean the kitchen before you can focus. So on the surface, these look like practical barriers, don't they? But underneath, it's usually our fear of failing, fear of not being good at it, fear of what it means if you try and still don't succeed. And ironically, the very thing we're avoiding, failure, is the thing we create by not even giving ourselves a chance. The next truth is people-pleasing is dishonesty. One thing we don't like to look at. We like to dress people-pleasing up as kindness, flexibility, or just wanting to be helpful. But the hard truth is that when we consistently say yes when we really want to say no, or we stay silent when we have something important to say, guess what? We're lying. Not just to the other person, but to ourselves. We've talked about this topic so many times on the show because it's a lot more common than you think. So for example, imagine your coworker asks you to cover a late shift. You are so exhausted, but you smile and say, sure, no problem, almost reflexively. And inside, you're already resentful. Or maybe your partner suggests doing something you don't enjoy, but instead of saying so, you go along with it, telling yourself it's not worth the conflict. But over time, this pattern really chips away at your self-respect. You teach yourself that keeping others comfortable matters a lot more than being honest. And every time you do it, your body feels the weight of that dishonesty. It's the tight chest, the forced smile, and the resentment that, guess what, is going to leak out later, because it will. Truth 3, we are not always as emotionally mature as we think. Here's a tough one. It's so easy to assume that because we're adults with jobs, maybe even accomplishments, maybe even good jobs, bills, responsibilities, that we must also be emotionally mature to have gotten this far. But the hardest truth is that many of us are still operating with emotional habits we learned as kids. Ones like defensiveness and blaming, shutting down, lashing out. Emotional maturity means owning our feelings. It means staying vulnerable. And it means handling conflict with emotional honesty and I statements. And that's not always our first instinct. So let's say you come home and your partner asks why you didn't text back earlier. And you snap, "Hey, I was busy. Why are you always on my case?" Now, in reality, what happened was their question stirred up insecurity. You're worried they're feeling neglected, or you feel guilty for not balancing work and home better. Instead of sitting with that discomfort and admitting, "Hey, I'm feeling a little guilty and I didn't want to face it, sorry," you lash out. So the immature part of you would rather deflect the shame than own it. Now, we can all do this at times, and admitting it doesn't make us bad people. But facing it is what allows us to grow into more honest, connected versions of ourselves, and I would dare say, emotionally safer human beings for other people to be around. If I could tell you one of the core issues that will ruin a relationship is a lack of emotional maturity on one partner's part, especially if the other partner has been doing some work on themselves. And in order to work on our emotional maturity, we have to be willing to do the grief work. We have to be able to be honest, gut level honest about our behavior and all those fabulous coping skills, like a few I just mentioned. And to really be committed to growing in that area. And in order to be emotionally mature, we also have to be able to practice being more vulnerable and emotionally honest, and to have boundaries, and to be able to detach. There can be a lot of work that goes into growing up on the inside. So those are some of the truths that we don't want to face about ourselves. The next area are the hardest truths about our relationships. And boy, this is where I see a lot of denial as well. So the first one is not everyone we love is capable of loving us in a healthy way. And I think this might be one of the hardest truths to face. We want to believe that if we just love someone enough, if we support them enough, or hang in there long enough, they'll come around. But some people, because of their own limitations, trauma, or their own choices, simply cannot give us the love that we need. And that could be biological family members, that could be your partner, that could be your best friend. So for example, think about the parent who never really listened to you growing up and who still changes the subject when you bring up your feelings today. You might keep trying, hoping that this time they'll finally validate you. But the truth is that they may never have the capacity to be emotionally present, no matter how much you hope. The same can happen in romantic relationships. You can pour yourself into loving someone, but if they're emotionally unavailable or only able to meet you halfway, that relationship will always leave you hungry. And accepting that doesn't mean you don't care about them or stop loving them. It just means that you stop denying reality and maybe start making choices that protect your own well-being. Another one is that fine is not enough. We often tell ourselves, it's fine, it's not that bad, at least it's not worse, I should be grateful. But fine can really be another word for settling. When we accept fine, we trade away the chance to feel alive, connected, and fulfilled. So picture a couple who's been together for years. There's no big blow-ups. There's no cheating. There's no obvious deal breakers. But there's also no real intimacy, no meaningful conversations, and therefore no shared growth. One partner keeps telling themselves, well, nothing's wrong. I should just be grateful. But the hard truth is that not wrong isn't the same as right. Staying in a relationship that's simply fine can quietly drain your spirit and really leave you disconnected from your own deeper needs. It's not about chasing perfection. It's about refusing to confuse not terrible with truly good. And remember, we're going to get needs met in healthy ways or unhealthy ways. And this is often where I see infidelity happen to people who thought that wasn't possible. Yeah, we can't ignore unmet needs, but for so long. We can also get those needs met in other ways. I just worked with a couple, and one of the partners had been doing a lot of community work and a lot of great work, but too much, where they were hardly ever home. And what's interesting is as they've worked on the relationship, they want to be home more. And they said last week that they're finally feeling like maybe they don't want to spend a whole bunch of hours out in the community, like do a little bit, but not to the extent that they were doing before. Now, before, what was happening is they were getting needs met that they weren't getting met in the relationship. The sense of belonging, being respected, being heard, being loved. And nothing terrible was happening in this relationship, but there were some unmet needs. The third truth is that being needed isn't the same as being valued. Let me say that again. Being needed isn't the same as being valued. Now, it feels really good to be needed, to be the one others come to for advice or support or help. But if being needed is the only reason someone keeps you close, guys, that isn't love, that's utility. And the hardest truth is that being valued means being appreciated for who you are, not just what you can do, not when you have to say no, not when you need some help or need something. So say you're the friend that everyone calls when their life is falling apart. You're the fixer, the problem solver, the rescuer. But on the rare occasions that you reach out because you're struggling, guess what? That line goes quiet. Or in a romantic relationship, maybe your partner leans on you financially or emotionally, but rarely expresses genuine appreciation or maybe even curiosity about your inner world. Yeah, you feel useful, but not cherished. The truth here is sobering. Being indispensable to someone's survival is not the same as being loved for your presence. When we confuse being needed with being valued, I think we accept relationships that drain us instead of nourish us. And finally, let's look at some of the hardest truths about life. Now, the first one's obvious, and we've talked about it many different ways here, but we can't control outcomes, only our choices. Control feels safe. If we plan enough, predict enough, or anticipate every possible scenario, maybe we won't get hurt. Maybe we won't be rejected. Maybe we'll be okay. But the hardest truth is that we don't actually control outcomes. We only control the choices we make in each moment. We have zero power over other people or circumstances or situations. We can't control their choices. So for example, let's say you spend hours crafting the perfect job application and rehearsing interview answers or trying to anticipate every move in a relationship. And you tell yourself consciously or subconsciously, if I do everything right, I'll get the result I want. But sometimes you don't get the job. Sometimes the partner leaves anyway. The truth is, no matter how carefully we plan, we can't dictate how life or people are going to respond. What we can control is our effort, our boundaries, and the choices we make when things don't go our way. Letting go of the outcomes doesn't mean giving up. It means redirecting energy toward what you actually have power over. But that leads us into our second truth, and that is grief. And that grief is unavoidable because when we're trying to control everything, we're terrified of grieving. And we don't just grieve death. We grieve lost opportunities, relationships that didn't work out, dreams that didn't unfold the way we hoped. I think the hardest truth is that grief is such a part of living. And if we try to avoid it, we're going to carry it in hidden ways. And it'll be in the way of letting go and actually living life. So let's say maybe you thought by now you'd be in a different career, or that your marriage would be healthier and more connected. Or maybe you long for the kind of family relationships you see other people have. But instead of letting yourself feel that sadness and anger and all the things of what's missing, you brush it off with, it's fine, I should be grateful for what I do have. But grief doesn't go away just because you minimize it. It's going to leak out, like I always say, as irritability, anxiety, numbness. And the truth is, you have to face the grief head on. You've got to sit in the shit. You got to cry the tears. You have to admit the disappointment. You got to sit with the guilt. You got to sit with the rejection, the abandonment. Because on the other side of grief is at some point, when it wants to come, is acceptance. Making peace with something. And that means a chance to actually move forward. I think the paradox here is that while grief feels unbearable to face, which is, hey, why we try to avoid it, numb it out, control things instead, it's actually what brings us relief. When we let ourselves grieve, I think we stop fighting reality and we begin to release that weight we've been carrying. Grief honors what mattered to us instead of pretending it didn't. I think it softens the body that's been holding tension, and I think it clears space in your heart, and it validates your truth. And it's the only way to make room for new hope, new connections, and new joy. Facing grief doesn't mean we like what happened or that we give up. I think it means we come to accept it so we can stop living in resistance. And that's where all that control comes from. Because in that acceptance, we find peace and we're not fighting anymore. But it is a process, and only by walking through it can we become free to live more fully in the present. And we can't do grief work by ourselves. We need love and support. We need some healthy people around us to hold us while we fall apart. And the final truth, change. Change is risky. But guess what? Staying stuck is too. We often convince ourselves that staying put is the safe choice. Don't leave the job. Don't end the relationship. Don't go start that new venture, because at least you know what to expect. But the hardest truth is that staying stuck has its own risks. There's regret, there's wasted years, and I would dare say, a slow erosion of your spirit. So let's say you stay in a job you dread because at least it's steady, it pays well. Or maybe you avoid confronting a big relationship issue because at least it's not terrible. On the outside, yeah, it looks like stability. But on the inside, your body knows better. You know, the chronic tension, the gut issues, the Sunday night dread, the feeling of going quiet inside. Because here's the thing, the truth is both paths, change and staying stuck, carry risk. The risk of change is discomfort and uncertainty. You have to let go of control, and you might be disappointed, and you might get hurt. The risk of staying stuck is losing yourself. And I have worked with so many people over the years who have made that mistake. and you don't get the years back. And sometimes it's too late. Choosing growth, yes, requires a hell of a lot of courage, but at least it offers the possibility of something better. One way to make the truth about staying stuck more real to you is to sit down and write out the actual costs of not changing. To grab some paper or a journal and ask yourself, if nothing changes in the next year, what will my daily life look like? How will I feel waking up each day? What opportunities will I lose? What relationships will be affected? And go deeper. Like if nothing changes in the next 5 years, what will I regret? Write it all down, even the parts that feel really uncomfortable and bring up the tears. You know, often when we see in black and white what playing it safe really costs us, our energy, our joy, our peace of mind, it becomes really clear that change, while risky, is the only path that offers hope. So today we talked about how facing these truths doesn't mean beating ourselves up. It means finally admitting reality so we can work with it instead of wasting our energy fighting it. When we face the truth about ourselves, I think we can grow. When we face the truth about our relationships, as difficult and upsetting as that can be, we can finally choose better ones. And when we face the truth about life, I think we can stop grasping for control and start living. Thank you for hanging out with me today. If anything resonated here, take heart. It just means that you are ready to hear it. If you need help looking at some of these things, check the show notes and click the link for the Power Hour. I have a few hours open this coming month. If you just want to sit and talk about what are some things that are hard to face, and I can help you sort that out and get you the support that you need. Okay, so pay it forward, keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.